So this is the first in the series on Tehilim of Majesty for the Noraim. What I am endeavoring to do is each week for Elul to study another chapter of Tehilim that is related to the season that appears in the liturgy, whether in the case of Elul every day and right through Shmini Atzeret. And we'll see that's today's. We'll do something from LDavid Hashem Ori. And then in a future installment, we'll talk about some chapters of Tehilim, installments, plural, chapters of Tehilim that are germane to Rosh Hashanah, to the Rosh Hashanah liturgy and the like. And I hope you'll take something from it. Hopefully it'll enrich your tefillah. I'm here with Faith in person, and we're learning together, and everyone else on Zoom. But if you want to come back in person, that's a good idea too. You should consider it. Okay, let's get right underway. This week it happens to dovetail with our recent Parshat HaShavua. When we look in the Torah and Parshat Re'eh, we find that it's the first we hear of a designated location in which to serve Hashem. Before the 12th chapter of the book of Devarim, we essentially have an idea that we have a Mishkan. It's portable. It's not fixed in a given location. That's obvious as to why that would be the case. They're leading a nomadic existence. They're in the desert. But the question comes up, what could the Mishkan have meant, hypothetically, for the arrival in the land of Israel? It kind of dovetails a little bit also with our general studies in this slot, namely our study of Sefer Malachim. Like, could you have envisioned the possibility that, well, maybe there's supposed to be a portable Mishkan that is built and then unbuilt, it's dismantled, it's moved to a new place, and that would underscore the idea that Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere. We don't need a given fixed location for a temple, for a mikdash. I mean, in other words, it's sometimes instructive to just think, what are some of the other possibilities that we might have thought? In the terminology of the Beit Midrash, you'd say, what was the Hava Amina? What would I have thought if not for what happens in the 12th chapter of Sefer Devarim? Right? In that chapter, we have the first presentation of the concept that there will be a place, that place will be chosen, and it will be a place that is the singular location, right? It'll be unique. It will not have any analog, and it should not have any competitors, right? Most of us are familiar with this idea, and it does come across as somewhat of a chidush, because now it turns out the Mishkan is itself no more than a temporary structure that is going to have it's going to be transitioned into a mikdash, fixed in space, right? And for those of us who traveled together through Sefer Shoftim, or Yeshua, Shoftim, and Shmuel, then we know already, as a matter of course, that there was a transitional structure, the Mishkan in Shiloh, where the walls were already made of stone, but the roof was still canopied, and the concept that it was still not the final resting place. Yeah. So when we look at chapter 12, the notion of building a Makom HaMikdash begins with a directive to destroy places of idolatry. The Torah uses the expression in the second pasuk in chapter 12, Abeita Abduna Kol Mekomot Asher Abdu Shama Goyim Asher Timur Shimo Tamet Elohehem Al Harim Haram V'Algvod V'Tachet Kol Eitz Ra'anan. It's not in the source sheets. I'm just reading off the screen. Yeah, you have to destroy these places, right? They're going to be under trees. They're going to be on hills, on mountains. Get rid of them. Destroy their name from that those places where they've set up source centers for worship. Don't do that to Hashem, your God. Ki rather el hamakom asher yivchar Hashem Elokeichem because yivtechem l'sumet shmo sham l'shichnot tirushu v'ata shama. Right? Only the place that Hashem will choose. You don't choose it, God will choose it. God will reveal it. We see that in Shmuel, Sefer Shmuel, right? From among all of your tribes, the place is named there. That's where you should seek his his dwelling place. L'shichno tidrishu, like the word shchina, right? Shchino shichno tidrishu uvata shama, and you should go to that place. And in that place, bring all of your offerings. So your offerings of various sorts, your tithes of various sorts, everything goes there. And what do you do when you get there? Eat it there. And you rejoice before God. And the psukim, which we don't have time to see more of these psukim, Parshat Re'eh, but we just saw it in the Torah portion this past week, repeats it several times, not for emphasis exclusively, but also each time there's another nuance about something else. You haven't arrived yet, you're coming to you're coming to the place of resting, place of heritage, and so on and so forth. But bear in mind, there will be a set location. It will be the central location. It will be the singular location. It'll be unique. It will not have other analogs in other places, and certainly not copies elsewhere. That's the place to go. Okay. Just worthy of consideration that is already described to the Jewish people when they are in Arvot Moav. And it probably did come as somewhat of a chiddush, given the fact they spent all this time and money and energy building a Mishkan. And now, well, and by the by, they don't know yet if it's going to be an actual building. Maybe the Mishkan is just going to be put up there. That's where they're going to set it up. When we look in the sources, we learn from the Sifri, which is the Medrash Halacha on Sefer Devarim. It's from the era of the Mishnah. And it's basically the halachic understandings of the various psukim. So, right? The place that God will choose from among all of your tribes. And we learn here the first line, Drosh al pi navi, right? You should seek it out through the word of a navi. Yachol tamtin ach yomer lecha navi. Maybe that means you should literally sit by passively and just wait. The navi will come and tell you where it is without any effort on your part. You're literally just waiting for the communication. And comes along the Medrash say Talmud Lamar l'shichnoti dreshu vata shama, and I put it there in green. Drosh umetzo. You have to look, you have to seek, you have to find. The navi operates in a confirmatory role, but not initially to be the one to tell you where it is. As we learn about David, what did David HaMelech say? Zechor Hashem LDavid eit kol unoto. Right? It's one of the Shiri Hamalot. We ask that Hashem remember David about all of his affliction, his suffering. What was his suffering in this case? Asher nishbal Hashem nadar lavi Yaakov, an account of his oath that he took to Hashem, to the mighty one of Yaakov, where he said, "Im ava ba'ol beitim el al eres yitzuai, lest I go into my own tent, to my own house, lest I arise to my own couch." Right? That's laid out for me. No. Im etein shnat le'inai le'afapai tnuma, lest I allow sleep to touch my eyes. I will not allow these things to happen. Why? Because I'm waiting, I'm searching, and it is a source of suffering, practically, to be engaged in that search. Ad emtza makom la'Hashem mishkanot la'avir Yaakov, until I find a place for Hashem, the dwelling place of the mighty one of Yaakov. We learned this parsha together, this chapter of Tehilim together in Sefer Shmuel Bet in Perek Zayin, where we talked about David HaMelech wanting to build a house for Hashem, telling Natan HaNavi that he wanted to do so, remember? So, and that's just on the heels of having conquered the town of Yerushalayim from the Jebusites, from the Yevusim. That's chapters 4, 5, and 6, the wars there that result in the conquest of Yerushalayim and David at the base of it, but then David saying to the Navi, I want to build a house for Hashem. And this is the chapter of Tehilim that goes with it, right? Now, then we find out that he did find it. Remember that the Navi told him he would not build it, but at least he showed him the location. And by the end of the Sefer, chapter 24, we learned this in longhand together, those who have been traveling together through Nevi'im Rishonim, which we try to do every Thursday, barring exceptional circumstances such as the month of Elul, right? So we find out minayin shelo asa el al pi navi, that in the end, before he did anything, actually he did have a navi. And who is that? That was God. By Yavo, God, LDavid b'mahu v'yomer lo, ale hakem l'Hashem mizbech begoren arona hayavusi. Remember that at the end of the Sefer, that is called Sefer Shmuel, 24th parak, David, builds an altar because the Navi, God told him to do so. Where? In the threshing floor of Arona, who lives in this place, actually on the Har HaMoriah. So that's where he gets it from Omer, and the parallel source comes later on in Divrei Yamim Bet, which we actually did learn inside as well. When we got to chapter 8, we talked about the dedication, 8 and 9, the dedication of the Mikdash by Shlomo. Vayichal Shlomo livnot Beit Hashem b'Yerushalayim b'Har Moriah asher nireh LeDavid Avihu. Right, he completed the building. Again, the chapter of Tehilim is chapter 132. Shelley, give me 1 minute to finish the thought. Chapter 132, which is read to you, right, which is a song of ascents along these lines, right? And the idea that we have a window into the spiritual strivings of David HaMelech, and there was a source of affliction, of suffering to him, unoto, in this case, on account of an oath that he made that he would not properly sleep until it would give him no rest until he found a place for the Aron to be. That, by the way, he did get to do. The Aron did have an ohel that he built there, the Aron Kodesh. He brings it up to Yerushalayim. That's described there in those prakim. Following the conquest of Yerushalayim, he brings it up, right? But the Beit HaMikdash itself not built by him. I mentioned also parenthetically in chapter 132 of Tehilim, we have 3 psukim that are very well known to us because we recite them every single time we lay the Torah down to rest in the Aron Kodesh. Kuma Hashem limnuchatecha ata va'aron uzecha. Arise, God, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. Chabad translated as your might. Okay, close enough. Kohanecha yilbashu tzedek v'chasidech yiranenu. Let your priests be clothed with righteousness. Let your devout ones sing praises. Ba'avur David avdecha al tashef pnei Mashiachecha. For the sake of your servant David, do not turn away the face of your anointed one. Yeah. So, okay. So you have that chapter of Tehilim. Let me take some questions, comments here before we get to the next source. Karen had written in this. Tehilim also reiterates Hashem's oath to David. There's symmetry. Yeah. Definitely. That's part of the back and forth. Shelley, go ahead. Please just unmute yourself. Go ahead.
My question is, was it known at the time of David where the Akedah took place? And was there the idea that the permanent structure for Hashem would be at the place the Akedah took place?
I don't know. My assumption is yes, because the Torah itself says Eretz HaMoriah. They knew it was in that vicinity. That much they knew, and it wasn't so many years later. It's hundreds of years later, but not thousands of years later. So it is likely they knew the vicinity of it. Whether they knew the exact mountain, we know where Midbar Sinai is, but we don't know exactly where Har Sinai is. And if you picture the topography of the Judean hills, there are a lot of them. And even in the environs of Yerushalayim, there's a bunch of different hills that it technically could be. So maybe they didn't know exactly where it was. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that they absolutely knew exactly the coordinates of it. They knew it was the place of the Mizbeach of, again, this Mesorah, right? Adam Harishon, Noach, then Avraham, right? Yecholiot. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the place where the Mikdash is going to be built. We think, well, it's so obvious that of course it's going to be, but Lav Davka. Maybe the place of the Mikdash should be the place where the Avot and the Imahot are buried. Maybe the place of the Mikdash should be the place of that is centrally located in the whole country geographically. The borders being southern border Beersheba, northern border maybe Dan, maybe even farther north Sidon, perhaps that far north. In which case maybe something like Shechem. Maybe something like Shiloh, maybe. So it's not entirely clear. In retrospect, to us, it seems patently obvious, and we can draw a line through it. But I don't know that necessarily saw it or thought of it that way. We talked a little bit in the Malachim Aleph Shir. That's maybe one of the reasons why they were able to the breakaway people, those who are, I was going to call them sectarians, but it's not really sectarian per se. The secessionists, the 10 tribes, why they got some traction and being able to build another worship center or centers, because they had another, explanation, the teretz, if you will.
If there was
wait, Helen, give me a minute. Shelley just wanted to finish the thought. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
If there was a tradition that it would be built somewhere in the Judean hills, why did they wait so long to capture Yerushalayim? Wouldn't that have been one of the first things you would have done? If not in the time of Yehoshua, you would have.
Your point is well taken, and the answer might be something substantive, or it might be something a little more basic, like geopolitics didn't permit it. Might be. You know what I'm saying? Like, it could be that they just didn't conquer it yet. They didn't get there. Maybe they felt that people weren't spiritually ready to own Yerushalayim, that there are responsibilities to own that area of the Judean hills, and therefore they didn't go there first. Although you do recall that when time you get to Sefer Shoftim, you do see that's how Otniel ben Kenaz gets this, that area, the whole area, Kiryat Sefer. So there, Shevet Yehuda does install itself there pretty early. I don't know, not sure. Helen, you had your hand up. I'm sorry. You want to say something? In Faith, you have a
Okay,
comment?
it's okay.
Helen.
It's okay. I'm gonna be all over the place.
Fine. So let me go to the next source then, because we're going to hit the hard stop, and I do want to see a little bit.
Okay.
That's where we're going. So the Sfat Emet, this past week's parashas, besides these sources that we just learned a moment ago, the pasuk in the Torah says, you should seek out, God's presence. The idea of searching for Hashem, right? Chazal say, Josh al pi Navi, Joshua Timsa. That's what we just saw right up here in the Sifri in green. Yeah, and then the Navi will tell you, right? That's David HaMelech, etc. So that's what we learn here. The Hinei Ktiv Ashiv Hashem v'lo gilalem hamakom miyad rakshiv b'koach drisha b'nei Yisrael ki Eretz Yisrael Beit Hamikdash fluyim ba'avodat b'nei Yisrael v'zeh shekatvu Chazal debaya drisha. Let me explain this line. Very important. It's the gist. It's the thesis statement of the Sfat Emet. Why does the Torah also not spell out where it is for the Sfat Emet? It's because part of having a place to serve Hashem means seeking a place to serve Hashem. The search is part and parcel of the religious experience. Eretz Yisrael is about that. The Beit HaMikdash is about that. The Gemara that is quoted here by the Sfat Emet is a Gemara Masechet Sukkah. Tzion hi doresh ein la, says the Navi. She is Zion and she has no one seeking her. And the Gemara concludes, Michlal debaya drisha. We learn from this that we do need to seek Zion, we need to seek Tzion. And he goes to bolster this idea. Shekatuv ba'avram avinu alav shalom lech lechav chulei. Go forth. Ela aretz asher areka. I will show it to you. V'lo gila lo miyad. Hashem did not tell him where he was going initially. Kemo chein pirtut makom hamikdash hayitzrich lebnei Yisrael lidrosh. People had to search for it, to seek it out. Twice Hashem says Lech Lechada Avraham. The first time is El Haaretz Asher Eka. I'll show you the land when you get there. The second time is V'lech Lecha El Eretz Hamoria. Al Achad Heharim Asher Amar Lecha, to one of the mountains. I'll tell you which one when you get there. Same kind of idea. The searching is part of the story. And for the Sfat Emet, the lineup here, Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael, and from a religious perspective, the having a central address with which to seek out Hashem begins with desire for it. Absent that drisha and that search, it's not truly going to have the stature that it needs. And that's our input into it, is the desire for it, the searching for it. He goes on, we don't have time to see it in such, why I put it as a second paragraph, that all of the descriptions in the Torah about destroying places of idol worship is to what I would say, I use this expression often, to fix the signal to noise ratio. If there's too much noise, you can't hear the signal. If there are too many other centers of worship for idolatry, they're crowding the landscape, you don't have a sense of focus that you're looking for that place. By the by, when it says in the Torah, Lo tasun elokechem, don't do this, the God Hashem, your God, it's not clear what it means at the level of pshat. Does it mean don't destroy places that you set up that are idolatrous, that are once you destroy the idolatrous places, don't destroy the place that you set up in the service of God? Or does it also mean don't set up in the place where there was idolatry places to serve Hashem and say, we redeemed the territory. Here was an altar for idolatry. We were matire it. Now it's a place. Now it's a shul, and dot the landscape with shuls. Don't do that. Rather, rather, I'm going to set up a central place. That's really the place. Not because you can't pray to me wherever you are, but when it comes to offering offerings, etc., that's where you have to go. And the Sfadma goes and develops this idea further that the idea that a person, in order to be able to seek God, needs to clear the landscape, external and internal, and to take out, the dross that might be stopping up their ability to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to set up a worship center, again, external or internal. The Psikta Rabbati here at the bottom of the page, we know those sources well, so I can start flipping around pages, looking them up. But the Medrash here quotes the same type of idea, quotes the same chapter of Tehilim, and I put here in red, Kevan Shira'ah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'omed u'mitzta'er al Beit HaMikdash. Once Hashem saw that David was really remorseful, regretful, meaning he was perturbed, he was troubled. That's really the word I'm looking for. With regard to the Beit HaMikdash, immediately, what did he do? Miyad shalachas lo Gad HaNavi. That's when he sent Gad HaNavi. In other words, even after the conquest of Yerushalayim, David knew it was a location. David knew it was going to be in this vicinity. He had conquered it. He was living down below. He knew it was one of the mountains. Which one is it going to be? It was Mitzta'er. He felt perturbed, troubled. What's going to be? That's when Hashem sent him Gad HaNavi and told him, it's Gad HaChozeh actually, and he told him that's the place. He calls him Gad HaNavi, but we call him elsewhere Gad HaChozeh. Right? He told him, Ve'ar'alo et makom Beit HaMikdash. He showed him the exact spot. And that's why, Kamash Katav, as it says, Vayovo Gad El David Bayomahu. On that very day. What's on that very day? On the day that Hashem saw that the degree of instability or inner turmoil for David had reached such a feverish pitch, said, "That's it. Let me relieve the pressure." And what did he find? Back to what we were talking about before, right? Umatz Hashem at Hamizbeach shebo hikriv Adam Harish shebo hikriv Noach shebo hikriv Avraham. When he was told the place, he discovered that this is the same Mizbeach that Adam used, that Noach used, that Avraham Avinu used, and now this is the Mizbeach that he's going to build on that spot. You'll say to me, I mean, seriously, no one knew that before? He came and he found an altar there, and he realized if God is telling me this is the place, it must be what I heard about in the Masorah, where all these things happen, is this location. By the way, this Medrash is seems to be paskined like this way, halachically, by the Rambam, Hilchot Beit Bechira. He does mention the history of the Makom HaMikdash, and he does quote these midrashim, sounds like pretty authoritatively. This is like a tradition that we have, that there's a universal dimension, Adam and Noach, and the national dimension, Avram Avinu, and the covenant between Hashem and Klal Yisrael is now being brought to its next phase of its unfolding by having a Makom HaMikdash set up. First a Mizbeach and a tent for the Aron, and then soon to be a Mikdash essentially built around it. It's the same location. Yeah. Now, Kevad Shematza Oto, once he found it, means like he rediscovered it. Then what did David do? From here to here is going to be the Azar, is the courtyard area. Mikan v'ad kan Kodesh Kodashim is the Kodesh Kodashim is going to be. B'ma shekatav v'yomer David zehu beit Hashem ha'elokim. That's why this demonstrative, because he's already measuring things, right? How did he know? Once he knew the Mizbach la'olah, then he could figure out where everything else was going to go. In other words, that was the point by which everything else could be organized. But to get to that point, to be able to build up Mizbeach, first comes the inner drive, the inner search, the feeling of wanting to have a place. That's what could enable it. And this whole introduction, which is timely because we always read Parshat Re'eh, either on Rosh Chodesh Elul or right after Rosh Chodesh Elul. So it was Rosh Chodesh, some years it's not, right? But it's within Chodesh Elul, we read Parshat Re'eh, is to give us this signal. And concurrent to that, we have a tradition which is not thousands of years old, it's several hundred years old, which is that we recite beginning of Elul, at the start of Elul, and following us through pretty much the end of the season till Shmini Atzeret, including Shmini Atzeret, we recite LDavid Hashem Ori, the 27th parak of Tehilim. What I didn't give you here in these sources, which I could have given you, is that the easiest reason why we say it and why it became a tradition is because the Midrash Vayikra Rabbah already writes, I think it's actually also in Shmot Rabbah, LDavid Hashem Ori V'yishi, LDavid Hashem Ori b'Rosh Hashanah, V'yishi b'Yom Kippurim. God is my light on Rosh Hashanah, and He is my salvation on Yom Kippurim. Previous years, when we learned this chapter, we focused on that. The Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, then later on in the same chapter, Ki tzpineni b'suko. God will conceal me in His sukkah. So when you put all of that together, the idea is that it fits with the season. I want to talk about another aspect of it, and that's this singular request, also a unique request by David HaMelech. LDavid, says the Malbim, b'mizbor hazeh yivaer ki hashgacha nimshechet achar hadveikut b'Hashem. In this chapter of Tehilim, what is explained and elucidated is that the providence of Hashem for a person, the element, the layer or level rather of providence that a person has, flows from or is drawn according to the level of cleaving that the person has with Hashem. V'adavek bo tidbak bo ha'ashgacha, v'adavek bo tidbak bo ha'ashgacha atmidit tishmer mikol ha'pga'im. An individual who really cleaves to Hashem will have an ongoing providential relationship with Hashem, which will mean they'll be guarded from harm. Va'alkein samach samuch libo lo yira mishum davara. That's why it says in the further along right here that his heart will not be afraid from anything evil. Right? We know practically by heart already. I think it's already a weekend. David Hashem Ori V'Yishim Mimi Ira. Right? So why is that? Who shall I fear? Because I feel very close to Hashem. Ki lo yi'uneh latzadik kol ra rak b'rega asher hifsik chut hadveikut v'nifnem avodat Hashem. Because no calamity will befall a righteous person, writes the Malbim, only in the moment, the instant where the line of cleaving to God is interrupted and they're temporarily interrupted in their service of Hashem. I know, like you know, and I'm sure the Malbim understood, the point here is that a human being has their moments. It can't be that it's a constant, right? That's the human frailty. So there are moments when a person perhaps is niftem avodat Hashem. It might be instantaneous, but there's something there. In the third section, it's actually a mistake here. It should be the parak, at least in my version, the Rav Kapach translation of the Moreh, of the God of the Rambam, the God of the Perplexed. It's actually chapter 52, but okay. And he says, he writes this. The Rambam himself writes this idea. And therefore, from all of the myriad requests that a person might have in their prayers, the truth is the most appropriate one is the one's most the core request of which from everything else flows, right, is one request. V'hushi dabeik b'Hashem tamid, that the individual be able to cleave to God always, right? Even though it's perhaps an elusive request, but it's a request nonetheless. And that if that's taken care of, everything else flows from there. Al pi zeh mitpalel, on account of this or knowing this, does David daven shi'azru Hashem al dveikud hazeh. This tefillah, chapter 27 of Tehilim, is about dveikut, about connecting, cleaving to Hashem. Yasimi alav kol hamonim asher yashbituhu min ha'inyan hagadol hazeh asher hu tachlit oshro bakashato. And therefore, the tefillah here is, can you please help me to take away all of the obstacles that would prevent me from this great matter? Namely, to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be cleaving to Hashem. That's the request. So for the Malbim, that's what this 27th parak is all about. And of course, the signature pasuk of which everything is built around it seems to be the pasuk we know very well. Many songs written to many tunes put to the lyrics. There's one thing that I ask about Hashem, and it's this that I request. What is it? Right? I dwell in the house of God all the days of my life, to have a vision of the pleasantness of God And ulevaker behechal. What does levaker behechal mean? So Rashi tells us he gives two ideas. One is from the great Chacham Dunash ibn Labrat, who was one of the great Spanish medieval exegetes. He, by the way, Dunash ibn Labrat, if you sang Dror Yikra last Shabbat or this coming Shabbat, he wrote it. Dunash ibn Labrat. He's in the bencher. That's what Dunash ibn Labrat said. Every morning, meaning with the renewal of day, I want to feel every day a renewal that every day I'm in the morning, I'm in his sanctuary. Literal, figurative, both. Menachem, it's Menachem ibn Saruk, also one of the great grammarians of the Spanish medieval exegetical endeavor, quoted by Rashi several times also in his commentary on the Torah, in fact, many times. What did he say? He put it together with Chibro im lo yivaker ben tov lara. He put it with the word examine or analyze or discern between two things. Aval dunash patar lashon boker. He seems to go back. He favors dunash ibn Labrat. So according to Menachem ibn Saruk, it's ulavaker beichalo, to be examined, meaning to have a relationship with Hashem, means that I'm distinguished in his sanctuary, not in the sense of kavod, but in terms of attention being paid. Right. So that's two ideas. They quote in the name of Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik would say levaker is the pshat that we normally think of, a bikur, like bikur cholim. It's a visit, right? So Rav Soloveitchik had this idea, it's a beautiful idea, which I'm definitely have to quote in the Yom Noraim season, another context as well, which is a person who continually finds themselves in the same space, who comes day in, day out to the Mikdash or the Mikdash Ma'at, their surroundings become much more humdrum over time. The familiarity of necessity, familiarity has a positive element, but sometimes, God forbid, it could breed contempt or perhaps some kind of ennui or some such thing. So, ulavaker behechalo. And yet, even though I want to be always in your house, Hashem, I still want it to feel like a visit, because a visit is special and it's intermittent and it's not an expectation of the daily. It's an interesting idea. It's somewhat against the way Rashi interpreted it and either of Rashi's interpretations, but Kodum Komunov, that's the same name of Rabbi Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik. The Radak had a bit of along these lines, I guess. But just to recognize, the Radak situated this parsha, this parak of Tehilim, not as LDavid Hashem Ori V'Yishi, because I'm talking about the Beit HaMikdash has not yet been built like Mizmor Shir Chanukah LDavid chapter 30, but rather this is referring to a time before the existence of a Beit HaMikdash. It's a David HaMelech who understands that he's not going to live to see the building, but even just having the ohel, right, and the tent, and having the mizbeach, that's going to have to be enough. He asked of God here, if you look at the beginning of the chapter, the end of the chapter, it seems to be about military image, martial imagery. He wanted there to be a quieting from all of the wars, so that he wouldn't have to physically be engaged or mentally, spiritually, emotionally be engaged in wars. Now, wars could be viewed in a very literal sense because they were literal in David's time, but there were also metaphoric wars that David HaMelech struggled with, and they're also, I think, intended in these kapitel Tehilim, the Milchemet HaYetzer, etc. Right? Lashev Devei Hashem, he wants to dwell in the house of God. Look what the Radak writes: it's the house where the Aron is found, with the Nevi'im and the Chasidim, with the prophets, with the righteous people. Vashasham HaKohan Valavim. And that's where priests and Levium are. Kimo Asaf Ve'echav Ushar Yirei Hashem Ha'omdim Sham V'Taseki Mahem Ba'avodat Elokim B'Tzorchei HaNefesh. I just quoted this in another context, right? At our Chanukah Abayit, right? This is the Radak telling us that according to his view, the David HaMelech davens here about a house where there's an Aron, Brit Hashem, a house where there is an assembly, a congregation of prophets, of pious people, of Kohanim, of Levium, right? That's where people come. And he also adds, Ushar Yirei Hashem. And also all the other people who fear Hashem, who are there, Ha'omdim Sham, Litaseki Mahem B'Udat Elokim B'Tzorchei Nefesh. They're there in order to be engaged with anyone who comes, with serving Hashem with the needs of the soul. Yeah. That's what it means to have a vision of the pleasantness of God and to be within His sanctuary. And if you look here at the Radak, maybe it's a little bit more along those lines. Again, to visit always within the sanctuary. What's the Heichal being referenced here? There is no Heichal of Shlomo HaMelech. It wasn't built yet. This is David talking. The Heichal means the house that has the Aron in it, right? The little structure, which I'm not saying it literally, but I'm saying al derech drush was in a certain way a mikdash ma'at. It was a miniature temple. It wasn't the temple, but it was the precursor to what was going to be built in the future. O perusho, the Radak has another possibility. Maybe it refers to the Heichal b'shamayim. K'mo shama b'noam Hashem klomar shiel lo pnai levaker lo chapes b'schal nifradim shem malachei shamayim shar nefesh gezura mehem ve'aleim tashuv. Maybe this has to do with the exploration on a mystical level or a meditative level with the separate intelligences. He wants to be able to lift himself from a spiritual perspective into the precincts of the malachim, of the angels, and to be among them in a certain way. It is not trying to escape from the world, but the point is to, in a meditative sense, to be able to go there. Like you find in the Gemara Masechet Chagiga, where it describes the Pardes, right? So there, some of the Mefarshim point out, it doesn't mean there wasn't literal orchard, and they didn't actually go up to Shamayim in a chariot or something, but in a meditative sense, they certainly did that. So some ideas just to think about. We're going to say this chapter so many times, morning and night for 52 days, plus minus 52 days inclusive. So that's a lot of repetitions. And the idea that that's one of the things that we're trying to emphasize, having a sense that we hope these days will bring us closer to Hashem. The Kohen from Lublin added a nice little piece in the name of Rabbunim of Peshischa on this very pasuk. David HaMelech alav shalom lo hachzik be'atzmo shehu miyoshvei beveit Hashem rak shezeh be'atzmo she'al Hashem yitbarach. Right? He did not think of himself as in the sense of resting on his laurels. I'm one of the people who dwells in the house of Hashem. I'm so religious, etc. No, rather that's what he was asking of Hashem. Liot oto avakesh, ota avakesh. She'al kol panim zot kol mevukash shelo lizakot liot shifti beveit Hashem kol yimei chayai. In other words, going back to the pasuk, this is the one thing that I ask of Hashem. This is my request, right? And with the pshat is this is what I request. So it's sort of like I'm asking and I'm requesting, repetitive language because it's a rhetorical flourish. And what I'm asking is, may I dwell in the house of Hashem all the days of my life, etc., etc. No, according to Rabbeinu, yes, that's a pshat. The Hasidic rendering, Rabbeinu Peshischa, achat shalti t'meit Hashem. This is what I'm asking of Hashem. You know what it is? That this is really what I should ask for. That this should be my desideratum. My desire should be to want to sit in the house of Hashem. That's what I'm asking for. Not that I should sit, but that I should want to sit. Right? The cultivation of that notion of a desire to want to get closer to Hashem. That too is a tefillah. Again, on the level of pshat, it's a direct request. I'd like to dwell in your house. I'd like to have the zchut to be able to do that. I'm already there. But Rabbeinu Peshischa, quoted by the Kohen from Lublin, is right. That's what I want to have as my request. I feel like there's a question or comment in closing. Helen, your hand up.
Yes. Yeah.
Please.
Okay. I got several things.
Please.
The author in the UO magazine says we're mistaken because you brought about the military of David. So first, Nelson Anobi says, good to go. And then he corrects it and says, there is no peace in the land. So to say that David is maligned about Neki Kalpayim is not the whole story. You touched upon there was no peace, and that was an issue for building the Beis HaMikdash. Number two, what about Shiloh? Number three, what about Avimelech and Abraham, that we tip our hat to the Jebusites originally that this would be the place. And one more thing, Mara HaKohen. So
A
when
lot of things, Helen. I can't answer all these things. Too much.
Okay, but when we went through the whole unpacking of
Right.
Shlomo with the building of the Beis HaMikdash, on the other end of the scale with brilliance, when we say on Yom Tov, Mara HaKohen is the most radiant, beautiful, like we were there looking at the beauty of it all. So whichever one of those things you would like to address, please.
You've presented so many things. I feel overwhelmed, Helen. I must tell you, it's the point that I'm trying to make is that there was a progression. There was a time when there was just a Mishkan, then it was in Shiloh, then it came to Yerushalayim, and there was a certain development. And what we learned today was that the search is part and parcel of religious experience. The sense of longing is part of what makes the place the place. And part of the request of David HaMelech is that I want to be in your precincts all days of my life. I want to have that dveikut. I want to be in the house of Hashem and associate with these people, etc. But according to, again, the last source that we saw, it's actually an idea that we're almost saying we would like that to be our desire. And if it's not yet our desire, that's what David's really asking is, this is what I'm asking for, is that this be my request? Because we both know it's not always my only request.
Okay.
So the idea that there's a certain growth that's going on that is about that search and about not arriving immediately at the destination, but there's a certain, what seems almost like a meandering progression, but it's not meandering. It is guided. It just doesn't seem that way to us. It's Avram Avinu looking for Eretz Yisrael. It's Avram looking for the mountain that God will show him in Har Moriah and Eretz Moriah. Right, it's all part of that package.
But why Shiloh when Avimelech and the Jebusites already have a chazakah on the threshing floor?
I don't know if you mean Avimelech or you mean Malki Tzedek.
Malki Tzedek.
Yeah, Malki Tzedek is what you meant. Yeah, that's a
chazakah already. But why Shiloh?
These are great questions. This is what we spent like many months on when we did Shoftim and Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet, and it would take too long for me to explain why each of those places. They're each several shiurim in and of themselves. So anyway, I'm just noticing the time. I think we're going to have to unfortunately stop here, but at least we got a little bit of a window into this a beautiful chapter of Tehilim that we say so often. It's one of the Tehilim of Majesty for the Yamim Noraim, and we maybe understand a little bit better also why it's not associated with being recited on Rosh Hashanah. You know, you and I might have thought, I didn't give you the source, but I mentioned the source. LDavid Hashem Ori b'Rosh Hashanah v'Yishiv b'Yom Kippurim. Say it on Rosh Hashanah, say it on Yom Kippur. And I'm standing in shul for all of Rosh Hashanah and all of Yom Kippur, so it's beautiful to say it then. What are you starting already from Rosh Chodesh Elul? But now we understand. Because the preparation, the search, the sense of wanting to be a Shichnot Tidrashu is a part and parcel of the whole story of where we're going. And why does it go after Yom Kippurim as well? Because just because Yom Kippur left doesn't mean we're still searching. There's still something more that we're looking for. And it dovetails very beautifully, goes to the end of the Yamim Tovim to Shmini Atzeret, right? Why it's not in Simchas Torah, I can't get to today, but there's also a discussion over there why it should go to the end of Shmini Atzeret to Simchas Torah as well. But the same idea that we're looking for that. And we should be wanting to look for it, again, according to Rabbuna Fashischa. Anyway, that's all we have time for today. Wish everyone Shana Tova. God willing, next week, September 8th, like I mentioned last week, it's also going to have to be 10 o'clock in the morning, same time, also probably just 45 minutes, but I hope everyone's getting something out of it that we can take forward with us into the Yom Noraim period. I got to let everybody go, so wish you Shana Tova, and see you soon.